Clara Bennett didn't expect anything special from that chilly October evening in Vermont. She'd only agreed to attend the engagement dinner to support her cousin, even though weddings, especially ones that weren't hers, had started to feel like emotional landmines. At 32, with a stable teaching job in Boston, a cozy little apartment, and shelves full of unread poetry books, Clara had a quiet life, a good life, but a lonely one. She hadn't dated seriously in years, and she'd stopped looking for fairy tales a long time ago. So when she stepped into that rustic inn with its warm wooden beams, golden candlelight, and soft laughter floating in the air, she told herself she'd stay for an hour, smile, be polite, then leave. She didn't even notice him at first, the man behind the wine bar, pouring drinks with calm, confident hands. She was just trying to find the coat rack, but then their eyes met. He looked like someone from another time, rough around the edges in a good way. Tall, strong features softened by a kind gaze. He wore a simple dark sweater and jeans, but he stood like a man who carried quiet certainty. Cabernet, he asked, holding up the bottle. His voice was low, a little rough, but warm like the last sip of something strong on a cold night. Clara hesitated, just long enough to feel the moment shift. Sure, she answered, stepping forward. His hand brushed hers as he passed the glass, a small touch that somehow felt intimate, like he wasn't rushing, like he noticed her, not just her face but the tiredness in her shoulders, the way she clutched her scarf too tightly. "I'm Jack," he said, offering a smile that wasn't practiced, just honest. "I think I'm supposed to be the best man, but I barely know the groom, so I'm winging it." Clara laughed, and it wasn't forced. It surprised even her. There was something about him that made her feel a little lighter, a little more like herself. They started talking, slowly at first. She told him about Boston, her art students, the way she liked rainy days. He told her he ran a small vineyard nearby with his sister, how he never planned on staying in Vermont but somehow never left. There was no rush between them, just a gentle unfolding, one glass of wine at a time. People around them were clinking glasses, taking photos, getting loud, but it all faded into a soft blur. The real world had fallen away, and in its place was something quiet and electric. He leaned in closer as the conversation deepened, and she didn't lean away. She noticed the way he listened, really listened, not like most men who just waited to talk. And she found herself wanting to tell him things she hadn't shared in years, that she was tired of pretending she was fine, that sometimes, late at night, she stared at her ceiling and wondered if she'd missed her shot at something real. Jack didn't flinch. He nodded, thoughtful, understanding, and then he asked her to dance. No music, no one else dancing, just him, holding out his hand. She should have said no, she didn't dance. Not really, but something about the way he looked at her, like she was already something worth remembering, made her say yes. That's how it began, not with grand gestures or promises, just with wine. And the way his hand found hers, like it already belonged there, and suddenly, Clara wasn't just surviving another evening. She was falling into something she didn't see coming, something that already felt like the start of a story she might never forget. The moment Clara let Jack pull her into that slow, quiet dance, something shifted inside her, something she hadn't felt in a long, long time. There wasn't any real music playing, just the soft sound of an old jazz record coming from the corner of the room, half muted by the hum of conversations and the gentle crackle of a fire. But in that moment, It was enough, more than enough. His hand was warm and steady as it held hers, and when his other hand slid gently to her waist, she didn't pull back. In fact, she leaned in just enough to breathe him in, just enough to feel how close they really were. She hadn't danced with a man in years, not like this, not slowly, not without words, and certainly not without fear tugging at her ribs. But with Jack, it didn't feel like fear. It felt like curiosity, longing, that quiet ache that builds when your heart recognizes something before your head catches up. Clara's laugh came out soft and nervous. "I'm terrible at this," she whispered. Jack smiled and looked down at her with those gentle, steady eyes. "Good," he said. "Then you won't notice how bad I am." And just like that, she relaxed. They swayed, barely moving, her heels not even lifting from the wooden floor. But the air between them was anything but still. Every glance, every small brush of skin, felt loaded with meaning. She could feel the heat of his hand on her waist, how his fingers settled there like they knew the shape of her already. Her heart wasn't racing, it was holding still, as if waiting, breathless, for what came next. They didn't speak much as they danced, but sometimes the silence says more than words. Her head tipped slightly toward his chest, just enough to feel the quiet beat of his heart, and in that closeness, she could feel something she hadn't let herself believe in for so long: comfort, yes, but also a spark. Desire, not the kind you feel walking past a stranger on the street, but the kind that grows slowly, like a fire that doesn't need a match to burn. It wasn't wild, it was steady, and somehow, that made it feel even more dangerous. Clara looked up at him, her voice soft and uncertain. "Are you always this unexpected?" Jack's smile was small, but full of something that made her knees weak. "Only when the moment calls for it," he said, not looking away. And just like that, her guard slipped even more. They danced until the room emptied, until chairs were being stacked and candles burned low, until there was no one left watching but the stars outside the big bay window. It wasn't a performance, it was a moment, honest, simple, but impossibly charged. When Jack offered to walk her to the guest cabin, she didn't hesitate. The night air was cool, the gravel beneath their feet crunching quietly with every step. They didn't say much, but their silence had a rhythm now, a comfort that made the darkness feel less cold. At the door, Clara turned to say goodnight, expecting a polite goodbye, but Jack didn't rush away. He stood close, his hands in his pockets, and looked at her like she was a mystery he was trying to solve slowly, carefully. "Don't go to sleep thinking this didn't mean something," he said softly. Clara froze, her breath caught. No man had ever said that to her, not like that, not with such certainty. She wanted to respond, wanted to say it meant everything, but the words stayed stuck in her throat. And maybe that was the most romantic part of it all, how one night, one dance, one quiet connection could say more than 1,000 conversations. As she watched him walk away into the darkness, the scent of red wine and pine still lingering in the air, Clara knew her life had just changed. She didn't know how. She just knew it had started with wine. Yes, but more than that, it had started with him. The morning after that unforgettable night, Clara left Vermont with something heavy and unspoken sitting in her chest. She hadn't kissed him, hadn't promised anything. And yet, as the miles stretched between her and Jack, it felt like she was leaving behind more than just a beautiful evening. It felt like she was walking away from a beginning she didn't quite understand. Back in Boston, her life picked up as if nothing had changed. The familiar buzz of the city, the daily rhythm of teaching, the noise and pace of a life lived mostly in solitude, it all returned. But Clara wasn't the same. She kept going through the motions, but Jack lingered in her thoughts like a song stuck on repeat. She remembered every detail. The way his voice dipped when he said her name, the way his hands had rested so naturally on her waist, the way he had looked at her like he saw straight through the walls she didn't even know she'd built. Still, days passed, then a week, then two, and nothing. No text, no call, no sign that what they shared meant anything to him at all. It was the kind of silence that makes you question your own memory. Was it real? Was it just one-sided? Was she foolish to think that a single evening could matter? Clara told herself to move on. She distracted herself with work, with errands, with friends who didn't know anything had changed. But every time she passed the little wine shop on the corner or heard an old jazz song playing faintly in a cafe, she was pulled right back to that night. It wasn't just attraction, it had been connection, the kind that stirs your soul before your body even catches up. And now, that connection had vanished into thin air. Maybe he'd gotten cold feet. Maybe he was married. Maybe he just didn't feel what she felt. All the maybes haunted her, but underneath all of it was a simple, aching truth. She missed him, and not just the version of him from that night, but the idea of what could have been. She tried to bury it, to chalk it up to a fleeting romantic fantasy, but then something happened that made her stop breathing for a second. On a rainy Thursday afternoon, just as the sky turned the color of old tin and the city streets grew quiet, Clara came home to find a simple white envelope at her door. No stamp, no name, just her address, written in neat, familiar handwriting. Her fingers trembled as she opened it. Inside was a photograph, grainy, slightly off-center, clearly taken in secret. It was of her and Jack, dancing by the fireplace, her hand in his eyes on her. The kind of photo that looked like it came from a different life. On the back, written in ink that had smudged slightly from the rain, were 7 words that unraveled her completely. I tried forgetting. It didn't work. Jack. She read the words again and again, her heartbeat suddenly louder than the rain outside. It wasn't just a note. It was a door half open, waiting. Everything in her wanted to run, but everything deeper inside, everything softer, braver, quieter, wanted to go back, to find him, to ask the questions she was too afraid to ask that night. Was it real? Did he mean it? Did he feel this ache too? Because if he did, then maybe this wasn't over. Maybe it had only just begun, and somewhere, buried under weeks of silence and doubt, Clara felt it again, that spark of hope. Dangerous, romantic, unfinished. Clara didn't plan the trip back to Vermont, it just happened. One minute, she was staring at Jack's handwriting on the back of that photo, and the next, she was throwing a weekend bag into her car, heart racing faster than the windshield wipers clearing the steady rain. She didn't tell anyone where she was going. How could she? What would she say? That she was chasing a feeling, a moment, a maybe? It sounded ridiculous even to her own ears. And yet, as she crossed state lines and the landscape turned from city gray to forest gold, something in her chest began to settle. It was like her heart already knew where it belonged, even if her mind was still trying to catch up. By the time she pulled up to the small cabin near the vineyard, the same one where they danced like the rest of the world didn't exist, it was just after sunset. The windows were glowing with soft light, and for a second, she sat in the car, palms sweating against the steering wheel, wondering if she was about to make a complete fool of herself. But then she thought about the silence, the ache, the way he'd looked at her before she walked away, and she knew she had to really know if any of it had been real. She knocked lightly, and when the door opened, there he was, Jack, standing in the doorway with that same steady look in his eyes, only now he looked tired, like he hadn't slept well in weeks. His hair was messy, his jaw unshaven, and somehow it only made him more real, more him. "I didn't think you'd come," he said, his voice low and quiet, like if he spoke too loudly the moment might break. "I didn't think you'd write," Clara answered, her voice soft but strong. He stepped aside, and she walked in, her boots clicking gently against the old wooden floor. The room smelled like cedar and red wine, and it felt warm in a way she hadn't expected, not just from the heat, but from the weight of memory. They sat on the couch, not too close but not far, and for a moment, neither of them spoke. It was the kind of silence that asked questions, the kind that made you feel everything without saying anything. Then Jack turned to her, eyes heavy with emotion. "I was scared," he said, "of how much I wanted you after just one night." It felt reckless, but real. Clara blinked, her throat tight. "I thought maybe you forgot, or that I made it up in my head." Jack shook his head slowly. "I tried forgetting," he said again, repeating the words he'd written. "But I couldn't. I didn't want to." His hand reached across the space between them, hesitant, almost shy, and when it touched hers, Clara felt a warmth rush through her she hadn't felt in years. Not just attraction, not just comfort, but recognition. Like her soul had been wandering for a long time, and it had finally found its home. She looked at him, her fingers curling around his, and whispered, "I came back because I needed to know if it was just one night, or something more." Jack didn't answer with words. He just nodded, eyes never leaving hers. And in that quiet understanding, something clicked into place. No fireworks, no dramatic kiss, just a steady, soft beginning, one that didn't need to rush because it was finally real. They didn't talk about the future that night. They didn't make promises, but they sat there, hand in hand, the fire crackling beside them, and knew one thing for sure: it hadn't ended. It had started with wine, yes, but what they had now was so much deeper. It was the kind of connection that stayed, the kind that whispered, "You're safe here, stay a little longer." And for the first time in a long while, Clara did.